Hello everyone. Today we are going to be talking about how to create a smart mirror frame or chassis, which is effectively just a rectangle, a wood rectangle with a backing that's going to house all of the hardware components for your smart mirror. Now, there's definitely many different ways that you can create these frames. This is just how I would do it, so please feel free to modify any of these steps to create your own smart mirror. And with that, we'll just go ahead and get started. First of all, we're gonna wanna make sure that we have all the proper safety equipment. So I have here just some work gloves, I have safety glasses, and then I also have earplugs because we will be using saws in this video and other power tools, so ear protection is very important. We also have a tape measure because we are going to be making exact cuts. We have back here a miter saw. Optionally, you could just use a handsaw and then freehand cut these pieces, but I think it's a little bit easier to use these nicer pieces of machinery. And then we also have a sawhorse holding things up. Otherwise, you can just do this on the ground, or if you have a nice workbench, that works just the same. And then the wood that we have here that we're gonna be using is a 1" by 3" by 8" whitewood board. We also have, for gluing all of this together at the end, we have Elmer's wood glue. We are going to need 4 of these 90-degree angle mounting brackets, so these screw together and hold 2 pieces together in place at a 90-degree angle. We are also going to need 4 of these medium to large size hand clamps that you can move in and around. That's going to hold the frame together while we are gluing it. And then optionally, at the end, I'm going to sand and stain this as well, or not at the end, more so in the middle, but this step is completely optional. I have a fine grain sander, I believe the value is 220, and an electric sander, so we're just gonna smooth out the edges of the boards. And then we are also going to give it an oil finish just with boiled linseed oil. So a very simple finish. You can also feel free to stain it if you'd like, or you can skip this step entirely if you're not interested in sanding and oiling your frame. So to start cutting, we're going to make an angled cut. And effectively how we're gonna be doing this throughout the video is we're gonna take our saw blade all the way down and then push the wood up until it's touching the saw blade and then lifting it up. And effectively how we're gonna be doing this is we're gonna then angle this back down all the way so that it's at a 45-degree angle, and then we are going to be making the cut at this angle. And what I'm gonna have for assistance here is I have this clamp right here that is built into the saw, which is really nice. Otherwise, you may have to get a clamp of your own, but you're gonna wanna line it up and then flip this on over, and then you just push this clamp down until it is really, really sturdy and into place, because we don't wanna have our hands anywhere close to this while this is going. And then we're going to be putting this down, still making sure that we have enough room to move around. Make sure before you start cutting that this clamp is not in the way of the saw. And then we're going to go ahead and make the cut. And what it'll do is it will make an angled cut at the edge of this here. Now that we've made our first angled cut, we are going to need to measure the length of the board that we're going to want to cut for later on. But we are going to want to give ourselves a little bit of extra room in doing this measurement. So our final cut needs to be 23 inches, but we might want to go something more like 23.5, because you can always cut and shave more down, but you can never uncut something. Everyone knows the saying, you measure twice and cut once. You can't do it the other way around. So what we're gonna have to do here is flip this around so that we can measure the other side. Because this has an angled cut here, it'll be a little bit more difficult to measure on this side. So we're gonna simply unclamp this, flip it over, and then we are going to grab our tape measure. And our final cut needs to be 23 inches exactly. So I am going to measure out to about 23.5 inches. And then what we can do as well is use this shaved piece that we just cut off and use that to make a straight line on our board so that we can be sure that we are cutting in the correct place. We can move this board over, and you may need to adjust your sawhorse, which it looks like I have just enough room over there. And we're going to want to line it up. And you're going to want to make that cut right where you made the line. And also be aware that your saw will likely cut about 1/8 of an inch off of the inside of wherever you're cutting. So this is why we gave ourselves an extra 1/2 inch. So then that way we have a little bit of wiggle room in making this cut. So you're going to want to line it up so that the line is either on the very edge of the blade or in the center. And in my case, I'm going to make it right here, about at the front of the board. So now I'm again going to clamp it. And we're just going to go ahead and make a straight cut, not an angled cut this time. We're going to need to flip the board later. So right now we're just going to make a straight cut down. Alright, and now that we've made that straight cut, we're going to go ahead and get rid of this. This, just set it off to the side for now. And then we're basically going to want to do exactly what we did at the beginning of the video, where we made an angled cut. And be sure to not do exactly what I did and do the wrong side, because you're going to want the angled piece to be facing up, because you're going to want the other angled piece to also be facing up from this perspective. So make sure that the angle is up over here, and then you're again going to want to make sure you to not accidentally turn it on as well, so always open hand. And push it down, just line this up with the edge of the saw blade, maybe take it in just a little bit, because again, you can always shave more off later, but you can't unshave any amount off. And we're going to go ahead and clamp this. I just don't want the board to be at an angle when I make this cut, because it is very important when making these cuts for it to fit together later, for these angles to be very clean. Okay, great. So that's good. So now we're going to make this cut. And there you have it. You can see that I made it a little bit too on the inside, which is okay, because now I can just repeat this cut again as many times as I need to until I get it down to the length required. And you're going to want to measure from the longer end across. You're going to need it to be 23 inches exactly. So right now I'm at about 23 and I don't know, a little bit under 23.5. Okay, so now that we have our 23-inch boards cut, we are going to make our 14 and 5/16 inch boards. And this will be the shorter side of the rectangle for the Smart Mirror. And you can see that this here is a recycled 23-inch board, and more accurately, it's a 22.5-inch board. I cut it just a little bit too short, but again, that's okay, because we're just gonna recycle this and then cut it a little bit shorter, so there's really only a few inches of waste. And now this is just gonna be a shorter board. So I can go ahead and start the process, the same process that we did before, but now for a 14 and 5/16 inch board. And after you're done cutting, you should have two 23-inch boards and two 14 and 5/16-inch boards that are all going to fit together at the 45-degree angles that you have cut. Next, we are going to be cutting a notch in our board so that our cord that is going to be powering all of the hardware on the inside can come out of the smart mirror without making the back plate bend or taking up any space within the front mirror as well. So this way we can have everything be flush on both sides. And you're either going to want to make the cut on the short end or the long end, depending on the orientation of your mirror. If you'd like your mirror to be vertical, you'll want to make the notch in one of these smaller boards. However, if your mirror is going to be horizontal, you want to make the notch in one of the longer boards if you want the mirror to come down on the bottom. If you would prefer it to come out on the side or in the corner, you can make the notch wherever you'd like. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be making the notch in the center on the bottom of the mirror for a vertical orientation. The way that we're going to make this notch is we are going to be taking our miter saw and just coming straight down into the center of the board. And then we're going to do that a couple of times and shift it over and then do it again and shift it over and do it again until we can fit our thin cord through the slot, and then we'll know that the slot size is large enough. For safety reasons as well, I have this small hand clamp, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp this to the board just so that I don't have to be holding it myself. Otherwise, you can hold it with your hand here, but just for safety, I'd like to use this hand clamp so that I can basically have a hands-off approach. You're only going to want to go about halfway because we're not looking to split this board in half. We just want to make a notch deep enough so that our cord can fit in within the smart mirror frame. I'd like to point out that much of this tutorial was filmed out of order, so some of the frames and pieces that you'll see later on in the video do not have the notch. It is possible to cut the notch later on in this process, however, it is going to be a little bit more difficult because everything has already been assembled together. So I would highly recommend that you cut the notch at this stage so that it's just a single piece of board instead of trying to cut a notch out of a frame. All right, so now that we have all four of our boards cut, we are going to want to sand the outer edges. Because these are all going to fit together like this will be the inside and it will never actually be exposed to the outside world. So it's optional to sand it, you could, but it's really going to be just on the inside of your machine. And it doesn't really matter if it's smooth or not, no one's going to be able to see it. Same with the edges, there's going to be a glass covering over this and then a back panel over this. So really the only side that is exposed is this outer edge. So it's with the slant facing down. This is the outer edge, which is what will actually be exposed. So that's what we're going to go ahead and sand here. So I'm just going to move these off to the side. And I have an electric sander with a 220 value, which is just a really, really smooth, fine grain value. And I'm just going to give it a quick sand. And even after just a quick sanding, you should be able to, there should be a noticeable difference with one side being very smooth and the other side just being the machine cut where it's pretty smooth, but you can tell that it's just a little bit rough coming from the store. So great. All right, now that we have our boards all sanded, we're gonna wanna get the excess sawdust off of them using something called tack cloth. And that's basically a really sticky cloth-like, web-like substance. And it just catches any excess sawdust that might be stuck in the grains of the board still, and we don't want that when we're staining and gluing things together. So what we're gonna do is just kind of rub this against the edges just like that, just to get all of the extra sawdust off. All right, and now we are ready to apply the oil. Now that we have our boards ready, we are going to be staining them with linseed oil. So, I'm sorry that it's dark. This is boiled linseed oil. It's just gonna give this white wood a little bit of a darker finish, a little bit more shine. So this is just gonna look like a little bit more of a professionally finished product at the end of it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna pour a little bit into this old Tupperware here, and then I am going to use a Scott's shop rag to apply it. You don't want there to be lint or dust in the rag that you're using to put on it, so you can use either an old t-shirt, or this brand should work well. Really anything that's probably not a paper towel, because there's little pieces that break off and you don't want that to get stuck in the wood. All right, so just the same way that we only sanded the outside of the board, we only really need to stain the outside of the board, the smooth sanded edge. So what I'm gonna do is just fold over this towel a couple times. Then I'm going to dip it in our linseed oil, and I'm just going to apply it over the outside. You don't need too much, so much that it's dripping off, but you do want to coat the whole outside. What I'll do is I'll give this another dip. And what I'm going to end up doing as well is have one dipping rag that I'm going to apply with, and then at the end I'm going to have one brushing rag to brush the excess oil off, because you don't want extra oil on there, else it will pool up and it's not going to look great as your finished product. All right. Now that all the oil has been applied, we're going to wait 5 minutes, and then we are going to brush the excess oil off. And be sure to check the can or the container of linseed oil that you got to look at the instructions about how to dispose of whatever material you had touching the linseed oil. It's very flammable, so do not store it in the open or in a very hot place, because it is potentially dangerous, being very flammable. So they recommend to put it in a sealed metal container. Check the container that you purchased it in for that advice. And now that you've wiped dry all of the excess oil from your boards, wait 24 hours for this oil to dry before applying any glue to set the frame together. Now that our boards have been sanded and the oil has been applied and dried, we are ready to actually create this rectangle and glue this frame together. So how this is going to work is we are effectively going to have these shorter pieces on the edge here, the longer pieces here, and then all of the indented cuts, the slanted cuts, are going to be facing inside, and it's going to create a rectangle like so. So here we're just spot checking that, yep, these do fit together well. There's no crazy abnormalities that we have to worry about. We're able to move forward. So next what we're going to want to do is take these 90-degree brackets, and we're going to actually hold these pieces in place. And then we are going to test that our monitor over here that we de-bezeled in a previous video can actually fit inside here, so that way we don't actually glue something together that won't fit the target screen. So all we're going to do here is be lifting this up, and we're just going to loosely fit these brackets in for now. Doesn't have to be tight. And then we're going to move these close where they actually need to be. And then we're going to actually start tightening these. All right, now that these are pretty much in place, we're actually going to now fiddle with these and make sure that everything is at a flush angle. And then we're really going to tighten these up so that these aren't going to go anywhere. So now that we have all of our 90-degree brackets in place and everything is held together tightly and flushly, we'd be confident gluing it this way. We now want to make sure that our computer monitor can actually fit inside. So all that we're going to do is this. We're going to go ahead and set this in here. And if we let go, yep, it is able to fit. Nothing is stuck. It's not like one end can't fit inside. There's a little bit of room, which is fine. Just a little bit of room is great. You don't want too much, you don't want too little, so this looks good. Next, we're gonna actually look at gluing this frame together. So we're gonna wanna lay something down like a tarp, or this is actually just an old curtain, so that we don't damage whatever table you're working on currently. So for now, we're just gonna move this over to the side, put it on the ground, and then we're just gonna open this up and protect the current working surface. So now that we're ready to glue, what we're going to do is we are just going to loosen this bracket, this one, and this one. And then we're gonna take these two end pieces off. We're gonna apply glue at the inside of the indent of either one, and then simply slide it back into place because we know that these two are already in a good spot. We're gonna slide it back into place, shift it to be flush again, and then wipe off any excess glue. And then we're gonna go ahead and add our additional hand clamps to really hold this together, and then we're gonna let it dry. Now, we are going to loosen this board so that we can take it out and then glue the edges there. But what we're first gonna do is just move this over to the edge of the table, and then that way we can just more easily unscrew this. It could be a little bit quicker. And then now this way, we're gonna be able to just slide this board in and out as we need. And what we're gonna do is just apply the glue right here, and then apply the glue right here, and we'll be able to just slip this right in and then reattach it. Before moving on, I'm actually going to apply, or rather just layer some paper towels under this as well, just so that any of the glue that drips off doesn't stick to this fabric, and rather the paper towel, and it'll be easier to get off. Now we are going to take our Elmer's wood glue. We're gonna give it a good shake, making sure that it's closed first. And what we're gonna do is apply it to this edge and then to this edge. So I'm just gonna put a little bit here. Then I'm also gonna put a little bit here. Okay. Now I'm gonna gently set this inside. And then try to set it back into place like it was before. Squeezing it down. I'm also going to wipe away some of this glue excess right away, just so that it doesn't dry into our nicely sanded and oiled board. You'll also want to check below the boards because the glue could drip down below as well. We're a little bit less worried about glue spillages on the inside. You still don't want that, so if you see a large glob of it, you can go ahead and wipe it away. But on the inside will be what's not visible to the user. And then you do have a little bit of wiggle room with your display as well. So a tiny bit on the inside is fine, but anything on the outside you will want to wipe off. And now what we're gonna do is just flip over to the other side and repeat the process. And then once you've completed both sides, the last thing you're gonna wanna do is make sure that this is flush on all ends, because you are going to be putting a back plate on here and then a mirror on the other end. So you're gonna wanna make sure that all of these are flat. And if they're not, then you're gonna have to open these up a bit, readjust it with your thumb and your index finger, just grab it and then pinch it until it's flush. And then you can go ahead and screw it back into place so that it holds. And now that we've got our 90-degree brackets on, we're gonna wanna use our hand clamps to really just press this together to make sure that all of these edges are really, really pushed together and that none of the edges are kind of angled or anything like that. So we're gonna want everything to just press together. So we're gonna have a couple of these. And this one will be down, placed right here near the bottom. And I'm just gonna get it tight, Just a little hand tight, I mean. We're not looking to pressurize this just yet, because what we are gonna do is shift them all around once we have everything in place. Note that some of this might shift when you're adding this, so you might have to loosen some and tighten others to really get everything angled the way that you want it to be. All right, and now that everything is flush and tightened up, we're gonna give this 24 hours to go ahead and dry. Now that this has had some time to dry, we're gonna go ahead and remove all of the clamps. And now you have a nice glued rectangular frame.